Hello and welcome to the Spiritual Gentleman podcast. And this is episode number 4 we're on. Yay, number 4. And I am here with my lovely and amazing friend, Tom Owens, who I got to meet through the ADHD support group. Tom, welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
Thank you, David. I'm very happy to be here. Your meditations have been wonderful. You are the spiritual gentleman. I believe in everything you have said and done. You are a man of epic word and deed, and I'm more than happy to be here with you.
Oh, I am you're so lovely, Tom. This is one of the reasons why I reached out to you too, because from one of the very first times when I first met Tom is I met him in the ADHD support group meeting we have within the Facebook group. And it was one of the very first times I went into that meeting. I was in a very kind of low place. And you said some really powerful words. I can't remember exactly what the words, but you are kind of, when I go into those meetings, you're like the norm of like the ADHD support group meetings, like the wisdom and the love that you give to people within the group and in the meetings in particular is just absolutely, you're such a wonderful person, and I'm so grateful to be talking with you. So what I would love to know is I would love to know a bit about your story. So did you find out when you were a kid when you had ADHD, or how did you find out that you had ADHD?
Great question. I found out, let's see, fast forward to the end. I found out at age 55. I was diagnosed with that, and I'm 61 now. Last year, I discovered after testing that I have the comorbidity of ASD1. High functioning autism, Asperger, just anything. I just know that ADHD has a co-star in my show. So
yeah, and so you're the full diversity, like you run the whole neurodiversity gambit there. You're like, all right, I'll take a little bit of everything. And so what I would love to know about too, because especially as someone, because there's so many people in our group and so many men and women who are diagnosed later in life, what I would love to know about is that what was it like kind of growing up? And so are you originally from, like, where are you originally from again? I can't remember that.
I grew up in Marshalltown, Iowa, central Iowa. And I grew up public school, and I grew up stuttering in part of elementary school, and I had no idea why this was. The speech therapist told me to try harder, and that soon became a regular hit song that was performed for me. Teachers, my parents, oh, you have such potential if you just try harder. And I thought, it's hard for me reading. I found that fiction was difficult for me, reading fiction, because I thought it's hard to empathize with characters and to understand, because I was a literal person, and I became drawn to nonfiction. And I wound up writing for the high school newspaper and then getting a journalism degree from Iowa State University. I wound up freelancing for decades. I have more than 50 children's books, mostly nonfiction, published by different companies, mostly for school and library audiences. That's one of those humbling exchanges of, you say, I have many books published. People say, are they at Walmart? Are they at Amazon.com? And you say, kind of at Amazon.com. And then just a minute, it says that your 32-page book is $25. And I say, it's a library hardcover, and the cover is worth more than the contents. And they say, but oh, I just like paperbacks. And it's like, that's a different kind of book. That's a different kind of author. And so they say, oh, but you kind of write. So I say,
That's
sure, why not?
I find that amazing too, because I love how you like, because especially I know with the autism as well, like as you said, you're very like literal. I loved how you were able to, because I know when you were probably growing up, there was ADD and ADHD. It was even like a thing talked about like at like when you were growing up, and then to be able to find, and especially congratulations on graduating college, because I never graduated college. So like that's like, it's but the fact that you were able to find a skill to like, okay, I like nonfiction books, I can write, like, and then the opportunity to have written all these books, and they go to kids, right, and to libraries, to people. That's so amazing, Tom. Like every time you say something, I just get more blown away by it. That's amazing. So how did you find so with the book, so that was kind of like your primary kind of thing. What was your biggest challenge kind of like through life, maybe through your 20s or 30s, of being undiagnosed? What were some kind of like things that kind of made life challenging, that you're like, I don't know what's wrong, but like there's something? Did you ever always felt like you were off? Like I always felt when I was, even though I was diagnosed at 9, I always felt like I was just off and different from everyone. Like I was put off to, like I was like, everyone's here and I'm like way over here, and I'm trying to like go here, but I can never get there. Does that make sense?
It did make sense. It did make sense in terms of social skills, in terms of whether I was in elementary school or whether I had my first job as a magazine editor. I hear several males chatting, and I walk over and say, hi, guys, I'm Tom. And the volume goes, ooh, and it's, and I say, it's nice to meet you. What are you doing? And then suddenly it's like the fire alarm got pulled, and one after the other, excuse me. And I'm thinking, I guess I won't be one of their chums here for a long time. And it just seemed to be almost like thinking, I have this force field around me that I get too close, and I was different, and I did not understand any of it. And I was able to think, well, that's not on me, it's on them, because I would be a good friend if they gave me a chance. And so I became, I was married for 38 years, and that was my one friend. She was wonderful, but I became a chore in terms of needing help. And she had said, I feel more like your mother. And that was the end of us. And so here I am, just with a cat, and thinking I have no idea what the future is going to be like.
Yeah, you bring up a great like especially after so many years of marriage with like the best friend. And it's something that in my own relationship with my fiance Laura, this has been a big kind of like, it has been a thing that we've had to kind of talk about, is that about my ADHD, because there are times where she said the exact same thing of like, I feel like I'm your mother now, and that just ruins, like it just puts a like this, it creates this way in the relationship where it's like, okay, she's the mother, then I'm the little kid, and then I rebel like a little kid, and then it doesn't create a good relationships. So we had to kind of, and it's one of the reasons I got actually back to really studying ADHD was because of her, because she started researching it. And I was like, you know what? This is my ADHD. And I need to kind of work on that and focus on, okay, what can I do to kind of, what are my little strategies that I can do? And recognize of like, all right, when am I putting her in mother position? And when am I going acting like a little brat? Like, and then, you know, and learning how to kind of balance that out and call myself out on it. But it's a hard thing to do, right? Like it's, you know, and it can be, because up to that point, when you got divorced, did you know that were you diagnosed at that point?
I was diagnosed, we were divorced 1 year ago. And so our relationship started in high school, and our entire relationship was 40 years. And I was diagnosed at age 55, and I had hoped that I would get more insight. I was taking meds and weekly therapy, but it was not enough. It wasn't fast enough. And she wanted a fresh start. And I was not as fresh as she had hoped.
Yeah, and it can be really difficult, especially with partners and relationships, right? It is one of those things that can be really tough, especially after so many years of like, because it can probably there's probably resentments and pains that come up with that. So after getting your diagnosis and kind of going through it, what has been like the biggest kind of like aha moment after you got your diagnosis? Was there like an aha of like, oh, I understand? What was like your big kind of like, did you have a moment that you were like, oh my God, like, all right, this makes sense? So how did you get to the point? I guess let me rephrase the question. I'm going a little all over the place here. So how did you find up to the point of where you're like, okay, I should go get a diagnosis?
I read Hollowell's book, and I mean, Dr. Hollowell is like the ADHD pioneer, and 100 question quiz. And what I need to backtrack a bit, David. What happened is I knew a bit about ADHD because I was reading and thinking, I have problems following through. I get distracted. I have no focus. And I looked at these things, and I went to a family doctor and said, I think I have ADHD. I need a referral. And he looked at me and said, and this is all true. He looked at me and he said, you should join a church. And I said, excuse me, please. And he said, yes, you just feel like you need connections, and you need to reach out, and a church would make you feel more social. Okay. Well, what about therapy or medication? And suddenly his nostrils flare, his eyebrows hit the ceiling, and he says, you're too old for stimulants. Someone over age 50 just wanting Adderall and Ritalin. And I thought, wow, I just kind of I tuned in late. I'm in the middle of some drama. And he says, you've got to find another way to get those addictive substances. He said, I won't be a part of that. And I said, wow. And I went home and told my wife, and she said, it's up to you what you want to do. And I wound up with Hollowell's book and his 100 question yes or no. Do you do this? Do you think this? Do you feel this? And I score 94. And so I wind up carrying the book with me as I see the next family doctor, because I don't know, I wanted someone else.
Yeah,
I
no, like
changed
that doctor
providers.
was like rude, right? Like it's like, okay, whether or not you're
Rude.
50 and oh, it's like not even handling the
Yes.
medical problem, right? Like it's not even like you're not even addressing the medical issue. You're like, all right, go, like community is great. And there's some great things with church and religion and community and
Yes.
bonding and connections, but it had nothing to do with like what you went in there for. Had nothing to
Exactly. I thought, does this guy get a commission on all new members that he sends to churches or something? It just seemed so bizarre. I wasn't understanding ADHD, and then I wasn't understanding how people could react in such hysterical fashion to that. And so a year later, I was able to say, Driven to Distraction by Dr. Hollowell, and bookmark, open it, see the quiz. And Mike, you have ADHD? I said, and it says, well, did you score any points? Were you? And said the new doctor, I said, 94 out of 100. That's a lot. And I thought, oh my, how perceptive this man is. And he wound up giving me a referral. And that was very nice, because it was just like a referral. Okay, there. And like, that's it for me. And it's like, that's fine. I don't need you to be my drug mule or something like that. And so I wound up getting to see a psychiatrist. And what happened is there was a multiple choice test which was given to children, saying like, on the playground, do you find that? And I said, you want me to fill, and remember, I'm 55 years old, and it's like, do you share any? And I'm going, what, toys? And he says, well, like, substitute adult words for when there's like children mentioned, and like, instead of parents, try your spouse or your boss or something. And I thought, oh no. But I went through, and my wife at the time, she came as well, and I think she filled out. This was so funny too, ironic, because I don't want to be your mother, but she was given the parents quiz, and saying, well, you're not his parent, but pretend those words mean spouse. And so it was a real half-assed way of diagnosing me, but the scores proved, I got a call back and said, yes, we sent your test in for scoring, and you have ADHD, inattentive, you have anxiety and depression. I thought, okay, and I got my first appointment, and then it says to me, the way I feel here is you're old enough that I think ADHD is mostly a challenge to children. If we treat your anxiety and depression, the ADHD symptoms will just fade and disappear. And I was ready, and I said, are you saying that I will never be distracted again? I will be able to focus and follow sequences of how to cook a meal and not burn anything? And I listed several examples. I said, so you're saying that my depression and anxiety, this would be like me winning the lottery if I was suddenly just so happy without any worries that I would never have problems focusing again, and I could concentrate on one thing at a time. And the psychiatrist, the eyebrows went down, and I got the Clint Eastwood glare, and says, all right then, and said, we'll discuss ADHD as it could be related and intertwined with, and so this was this grudging surrender from the psychiatrist, and I was able to get this. But I see on our ADHD Men's Facebook page, this is a problem for everyone who is, all the adults who are getting diagnosed. So many of them face a provider that says, well, you're depressed also. Let's just help you. And to alleviate those problems, those worries. And I asked the clinician who diagnosed me with autism, and fast forward 5 years, I said, why do mental health providers act this way? And she said, well, and then she checked to make sure no one was at the door listening to this. And she leaned closer to me, and it was like, don't repeat this, or do it. And I said, yes. And she said, so many people don't understand ADHD, said they aren't going to learn about it when they're getting their degrees, and said it's mentioned. And so what happens is everyone is hoping that anxiety and depression will pop up, and right away the healthcare provider the mental health provider can say, oh, I know those. Here, let's get some medication right away. And they want to throw pills at both of those.
Exactly. It's like anxiety, depression, they're like the sexy mental health diseases. Like, all right, these are the easy ones we can deal with. ADHD, that means I actually have to do work. Fuck that. Like, I don't want to actually do work.
Yes. And so right away they grab at those two recognized, and it's like, oh boy, this is my sweet spot here, and boom, and they grab those, and then you say, what about this? And they say, oh, clear off the big two, and nothing else is a problem. And so she confessed, and just a minute, she said, no, you can't prove anything. No, I never said any of that. I deny it all. And it's like, of course you do. But I mean, the idea of just saying, if I don't understand it, it doesn't exist, or I will prescribe a backdoor treatment that will sneak up on your ADHD, and it will clear it off without any problem. It's almost like bowling, saying, well, we're not aiming at the ADHD. Let's go for the head pin, and then everything will be cleared up.
But it's the funny thing though. It's like because it's like the symptoms of depression, anxiety, the causality of that comes from your ADHD, from the insecurity and the feeling different, of being able, the executive dysfunction, not being able to remember until you get how are you going to, that's what I find really weird about, and I've been talking to someone else about this as well, like how a lot of ADHD and neurodiversity treatments are made by neurotypical people. So from an empathetic standpoint, they don't understand what is going on, right? So they're coming at it from the point of view of someone who's neurotypical, right? So they don't have that life experience of like, oh, this is how it actually happens, or this is actually how I perceive or understand what's going on. And, I think this idea, like, ADHD is like the kid's disease, right? Like I remember when I was told at 9, like, oh, by the time he's an adult, it wears off. And it didn't make sense to me because nothing at that point until I learned cooking made sense to me anyway. And then after I learned cooking, I was like, no, like this is how I think. And is only until recently really understanding it. It's our brain rewiring, right? It's us, how we're wired. You're asking me to be a square peg and try to fit into a round hole. And it just is like, like, and it's, I have to say I am proud of you for advocating for yourself, right? Like so easy, and especially in the United States, the idea of kind of pill culture of like, let's just give it a pill and we're gonna solve a problem. It's I don't think it gets down to I medication can be very helpful, but I think it's a tool. If it's personally, right? I don't think it should be it could be if it's your only long-term solution, I think you're missing like half the battle, right? Like that can handle one part, but if you're not handling the holistic side of it, the day-to-day living, right? Because I think this is just me, right? Like I want to be able to live a happy and fulfilled life and not feel that I am less than anyone else, that I can go and do things. And if I forget to leave the light on, I'm not like, I'm an idiot and I'm dumb, like leaving the light on. Like so one of the things after the ADHD meeting that Laura calls me out all the time, because I get so excited and I get so inspired by her meetings. But for me, it's so late at night. It's like almost like 1 a.m, 2 a.m. when it finishes. So I just like, okay, I'm going to go upstairs and go to bed. And then like when we wake up in the morning, I haven't turned off any of the lights. Everything's still on and running because I'm just like, oh, I forgot about it. And she's like, oh, but she's like, you know what? I have to accept it. He's excited. When he gets excited, the focus goes even more because it's like energy shoots up. So then it's like, wow. And then so it's like, okay. And she's like, all right, Dave, take a calm breath down, go through your checklist, knock it off, move through the things. Wow.
And let's stop here. I want to interrupt you here because you are an inspiring soul, and here you are, and it's like, man, so many time zones away from basically the majority of members so far have been North American. And so it's sort of like everyone says, well, have a nice dinner, we're done. And here you are blinking and saying, how far after midnight was it that we went? And so you started another group as well for people who are in other time zones. And I think that's a wonderful example of reaching out and practical efforts can benefit so many other people. And some people say, well, that would be good for me, but we are not alone. And that's an example of that, very much so. So I am very delighted that you're doing that.
Oh, Tom. Yeah, no, isn't that the beautiful thing that I love about like the group overall? And it's that, as you were saying too, right? Of like, as you were growing up through your 20s and everything else, that feeling of that you are a part, like you're not a part, right? You're separate from everything else. And then having these groups, and I think it's especially for just men in general, I think we need to have, for men in general, I think we need to have that brotherhood and those bonds, right? We need to have, we need to have that community. And I feel over kind of the decades, it's these things that, all right, and I think as men go older too, it becomes so much more difficult to actually really develop those relationships, right? And developing, especially with, until we meet someone that we can kind of, oh, hey, I can agree with,
Yes, so well done. And so specifically, when is the new ADHD men's meeting that your spinoff?
You're gonna be my hype man. You're gonna be my hype man, Tom. You're totally my hype man. So the new meeting is on Mondays nights, so it's weekly. It's every week. Mondays, 7 p.m. GMT, so that's Greenwich Mean Time, so London time, 7 p.m. So for all the European, UK, Irish members, and it's an open men's group for that to serve those members, because it's, I was talking with a guy who is from the Netherlands earlier today, and when we go to different, it's interesting when we start to talk about different countries and how they handle ADHD and mental disorders and mental disabilities. Like in Ireland, it's still very much looked down upon for ADHD. Like the whole system, particularly for set up what's called CAMS, it stands for something, I'm not exactly, it's children's and something, but it's basically and so that's the only really ADHD service there is. There's 1 or 2 psychologists for adults, and that's it for the whole island, for the whole country. Like it is very, very rare, like no things in place. I would love to know more about, so for 5 years, you were like, all right, I have ADHD. So were you working with your therapist and psychologist at the time? And how did you get into the diagnosis of the autism? Because that's something that it's interesting. So I look at my dad, because I know autism and ADHD and neurodiversity is hereditary. I look at my father, and there are things I'm like, I think he may have like mild autism or Asperger's. There's certain the way he kind of operates and acts as I'm learning more about this. So I'd love to hear a bit more about your journey of like kind of coming to the autism and learning more about how you learned more about that.
That is slightly mystical, in which my therapist paused, and I thought, okay, what are you thinking? Usually it's like, and so how do you feel about that? Or what do you think when you say so? And so here it was, and and I said, what are you thinking? And she says, would you like to learn more about yourself and your neurodiversity? Yeah, let's do it. And she says, well, I think you could be tested for comorbidities. And I said, I know that word. I know that word. And I said, related conditions. And I said, did you have one in mind? And she looked at me, how will he handle this? And she said, autism. And I had read a bit about it, and I said, yes, please. And I think I wound up doing somewhere between 6 to 8 hours of tests. Of course, we're in the pandemic age of, can you just do this on Zoom? Or could you come to the office for just one? And so this and that and this, and well, my supervisor wants me to explore this more deeply. And I'm saying, okay, I'll come back more. I'll come back more. This is wonderful. And so what happens is at last I have your report ready, and it's 17 pages, and it's like, yes, autism. And also there were times of which we want to test you without your ADHD medication, and then saying, yes, you may take your Wellbutrin. And so and then to see my report that says, even with medication, his cognition seems below average. And I thought, yes, I think so. It's like coffee and medication or something. And because it was like this testing. And sometimes with an ADHD mind, just answer these questions. And you say, but wait, these are questions. what are the implications of my answer going to be? And then I think, wait, what time is it now? Where am I? And so
and you
I
just go
say,
down the
of
rabbit
course.
hole of things, and it's just like, wow.
Yes. And so it's like Tom seemed rather distracted when we were trying to test him for these things. And I just thought, yes, I mean, show respect for mental health professionals. Duh, page after page of this. And it was like, yes, I am looking at both of those. My speech pattern was one thing that the therapist said. And I mean, the childhood of stuttering, and also with the ADHD men's support group, I had several people saying, excuse me, what country are you from? And I just say, well, that's interesting that you ask, because I'm ordinary here from the Midwest. And they'd say, well, you have this deliberate way of speaking. I grew up with a father who was the only member of the family not born in Kentucky. And I was just surrounded by Southern accents, and just everyone spoke so liltingly in their phraseology.
And you got that, like that molasses in the mouth that just kind of slows down the voice just a little bit there. I know I can't do it great, but you know what I'm saying? It's one of those things that kind of just changes how your inflection speaks.
Yes, exactly. And so that was a great influence to me. And so yet it's like, well, despite that, your speech seems to be affected. And I thought, that's fine, that's good, because yes, I have the ability, I think, to, before I get derailed, of course, I think, I just edited the sentence I am about to say. I can give you both versions of it if you would like. And people would say, oh, I'm sorry, I nodded off while I was waiting for you to speak yet one more word. And that's just the way I am, the way that I am wired. And so I was seeing these things. I was also seeing examples of me asking a therapist, saying, something happened today. I was puzzled. Is this normal behavior from other people? And I would offer the scenario, and it's like, Tom doesn't know what is normal. And then one scenario in my testing, David, that just, I'm still wanting to say, come on, let's go 2 out of 3 on this one. I'll still take you on and stick by my answer. What happened is, the clinician said, here's a question for you. How do you know if someone is your friend? And the expected answer was to observe and to compare that moments and outings that you have, and when you look at your feelings compared to the other person's feelings, that ultimately you will both make a mutual decision in which one of you might say, it's nice to have a friend like you, and the other person will say, oh, sure, why not? And I said, contrastingly, I said, ask them. When I got my journalism degree, one of the few useful, practical maxims that I'm thinking, wow, thousands of dollars, 4 years for this, but professors saying, if your mama says she loves you, check it out. and simply meaning by it was a fun way of saying trust but verify. And so if you hear something, you say, thank you. Backtracking just to check, you just said, and so I had just said, is someone your friend? Ask them. David, are you my friend? I feel like I'm your friend.
You are my friend, Tom.
And then you'd say, oh, I sense autism here in the room. We're going to have to contact the authorities. And it was just like, okay, well, my perceptions might be off kilter compared to the neurotypical people, but that was like, we've observed things like this. So for me, it's like, I guess I was born autistic, and then got my graduate degree in autism, but there were examples of almost like algebra problems. Suppose you're traveling at 20 miles an hour, and I'm just thinking, you ask.
Exactly,
if you
right?
want to know something, you ask.
See, if I was to ask that same question, how do you know if someone's a friend? I would ask them. I don't think that's a wrong. I think that's a good answer. Like, that's how I would figure it out, right? Like, how do you know if someone's your friend? You have mutual interests and you ask them. How does a 5-year-old make a friend? They go up to them and they, hey, do you want to be my friend? Right? Like, that's what a 5-year-old does. Like, doesn't mean they have autism. That's just their. That's how you find.
Thank you. Thank you. It's like, can we hear an amen, somebody? Yes. And the people say, and yeah, thank you so much, because I felt that some of the test questions were almost like me thinking, now, I feel like I put money in the parking meter and I want to deal with these questions in a timely fashion. I don't have the entire afternoon. I just think, oh, if this happens, I'll try this. And I would try something else if the first attempt did not work.
Right, because it's very logical thinking, right? Because it's part of, like, kind of with the autism, and particularly I think ADHD and autism, right? And it's also for men too, just being as men as well, we're more left brain thinkers than right brain. So it's very logical, right? All right, like, give me A to B to C, boom, boom, boom. Like, I want a straight, clear kind of line.
Yeah.
So, and it's very fascinating, right? Because as soon as we throw in our emotions in there, like, was that something you kind of, like, as you were growing up or after you've got your diagnosis, did that kind of help you handle or deal with your emotions better? Was that something that you got to, through therapy and everything, that you got to work on, or was that ever an issue for you?
It was an issue. It remains an issue for anyone out there who says, emotions. Oh, I get so pissed off sometimes. Yes, you will get pissed off. Yes, I will confess it still happens on a daily basis. It's called rejection sensitive dysphoria, RSD, people, RSD. And what happens is I will feel my temperature. I'll feel like I'm boiling occasionally, and someone will be speaking and I'll just be saying, this sucks. This person and me, why me? And so what is happening is I just want to scream, and then I want to accuse them. I want to accuse them and say, you meant to be this way. You chose me right now. And I realize it's just a matter of pausing, and I just have the ability to say, I know what I want to say, I know what I'd love to say. I'm reacting in my head, and I feel the physical reactions, and then I'll just exhale, and then the people will say, and it's over. It's over. It's not a life-changing, haunting, continual experience, but I face those times. I have had times in which I've been I've been called on ADHD behavior, and I've simply wanted to explain how I felt. And I have had my former wife would say, "You're making excuses," and I would say, "It's an explanation." And I'd say, "Boo," and you just think there's steam coming out my ears, but I just want to try to explain, and I would become so wrapped up in thinking I'm not being understood at all. And so the idea of being able to say pause, put the pause button on, and I feel like I'm freeze frame man, in which and it's moving slightly, but no sound comes out. I'm not acting, I'm just there ready to act. And so it's I cannot imagine a rejection sensitive dysphoria not bothering an ADHD person. And so in terms of understanding your emotions, I understand that I react in a passionate manner when I feel like I'm being challenged.
And misunderstood, right? I love the word
Thank
misunderstood
you.
there, because it's one of these things that I feel as ADHDers and people in the on the spectrum, right? Like in the neurodiversity, the whole space there, we feel like
Yes.
this is why we have I do this even to other ADHD. I'm like, do you understand what I mean? And like, I feel like that's like my ending to so many sentences, because it's making sure that you understand what I said, because I had to say it out loud, because I have to verbal process it, because I don't know exactly what I'm saying until I actually say it out loud. And I'm not sure what I'm saying until I actually say it. So do you know what I mean? Because I don't know what I mean, but can you know what I, like, and
yes, yes.
Do you know what I mean?
I'm there. Yes, yes. It is like let's do it some more. Yes, because it's so true. It's so true. And I think some of those passionate feelings come up when you believe, and after years of having ADHD, diagnosed or undiagnosed, it's a matter of thinking, do people believe this is real in me? Do they believe I can still choose and say, oh, this is not the time or place to have rejection sensitive dysphoria. One moment, there. I don't feel that way anymore. It's not happening to me anymore. I have put it in check on the shelf. I cope with those intense feelings, but they're there. I know they're there, and I name them, and I'm able to hold on, not always, and not perfectly, because RSD is a greased pig, and it's like squealing, and it's like, oh, come back here. And
it could be the little thing too, right? You could be like, all right, I'm hold
yes.
on to it, and then like some like small little comment will like slip it right out, and then boom, it's just, and it goes right off again. It could be little, for me, it could be a little thing that hits them deeper. And it just sends you on right back on that kind of spiral. I love your technique too of like, okay, I know the feeling, I can put it off to a side, I can breathe through it, take the pause, watch your reactions. I have this phrase that I got it kind of from a movie and I've adapted to my own. And you've heard me say this before. Emotions are like children. You can't let them drive the car, nor can you stuff them in the trunk. They belong in the back seat.
Thank you. You've said it before, and I go, ooh, and I'll double ooh for that. Nice, so nice.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, yes. And some, yeah, some sometimes I just think it's almost like having an elderly relative, your grandparent or something, who says, "Oh, that bothers you. Well, stop it right now." And you think, oh, and you go, "No, I told you to stop it." And then it's a matter of, have you chosen to keep feeling that way? Can you just flush and it's gone instantly? No, it is something that is with you, and you can feel like you've mastered it, but that doesn't mean you eliminated it. And so, yes, they are children that I would like to deal with in extreme ways as well, or saying, would you like to ride on the roof, boys and girls, or something? And you say, no, but oh my God, that felt so good just to say it and ponder it a moment. So I agree so much, David. Yes.
Yeah, it's so I would love to know. So in the last kind of 10 years of like getting both the diagnoses, what's been like the biggest kind of like lesson that you've like kind of learned through these last 10 years of finding your diagnosis, like understanding yourself and your autism and your ADHD? What was like your biggest win like in the last 10 years, would you say, from going on this kind of journey? What was the big thing you've learned or gained?
That what immediately comes to mind is that you can have ADHD. You can, and this probably more in the autistic community of people say, I am autistic. And I would say to them, I have autism. I know who I am. And I know that I was a volunteer receptionist at the Salvation Army office years ago. And I saw one grandmother come in, and there was this itchy child, and he was talking, and she turned around and she said, I get so tired of you and your ADHD. Why can't you just be still and be quiet? And I turned to her and I said, did you know I have ADHD too? And she said, oh, well, you mean when you were his age? And I said, I didn't know I had it like he does, like you know. I said, and then I turned to the boy and who was just staring at me, and I said, it's not you. You have ADHD. I said, but it will get better. And that's what I feel. That's what I feel about this. ADHD, any comorbidity, it is not there to own you. You can own it. It will be like a used car. It might not always perform as you are expecting it to, but you will be able to get along with it. You'll be able to know what works and what doesn't. And for the most part, you will say, I'm getting by. The car will get you to work. The car will do mostly what you want it to do most of the time. You will
It's just
like having it
the right
play.
blinker just stays on a little bit longer. The right blinker sticks sometimes, you know?
Yes, yes. And so the horns honking, oh, it must be that. Okay, I'm sorry. And then you say, I feel good. I still feel good. And I still feel good because I still feel like I am myself. And in terms of people carrying moments in the past, this is the one other thing I would say so devoutly to anyone listening to this right now. You are not who you were last year. You were not who you were last month or last week or yesterday. You have a new start as of listening to this podcast. You have the ability to understand yourself. You have the ability to be yourself again and to be better than you've ever felt before. It's up to you to learn and to take control of life.
Bam! You know what that is? That is a mic drop right there. Bam! You just said it so succinctly, Tom. That is absolutely gorgeous. What a beautiful message. And it's, you know, why I got into going from being a chef for 20 years to moving into the coaching field. Because like you said, right, I want to help. This is my personal mission, is I want to help guys and men in particular to their ADHD so it doesn't control them, right? It's so easy to be controlled by our emotions, to not be in control, and to gain some control back in our minds, understand why we work and how we work. That was such a beautiful statement. Tom, we're almost actually out of time there. We're a little bit over, but that is, oh, you left it as such a wonderful note. Tom, before we end, do you have another big final thought before we close out?
Yes, 3 words. Asking is free. If something baffles the hell out of you in terms of your own thoughts, of your own behavior, one source will give you one answer. If your mama says she loves you, check it out. Confirm what you learn online in a book from a therapist. There are many great resources. This podcast, too, I would put at the top of the list. But check it out. Make sure you feel good about this, because with any information, your mileage may vary, just like the TV commercial says. And so always be fine-tuning, saying, I think I know this, I've learned this, another source said the same thing, but is it for me? Is this information regarding me in my life? Always ask, never stop asking, because asking is free.
I love that, Tom. I absolutely love that. That is fantastic. And with that, we're going to leave it on that note, because asking is free. Because if I didn't ask you, you know, right? Like we get everywhere we go by asking. And thank you so much. Once again, thank you to my guest, Tom Owens, for this episode of the podcast. And as I like to do, I want to say very good, yay. I wish everybody a great, if not better day.